Oi, 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 YouTube. It's good to see you guys. Good morning. I hope you've unclenched your jaw. I hope you're having a great morning. It's early for me. I haven't even had my coffee yet, but we are going to try to get a tier list video done today for you guys to try to see where Trickster is on the tier list as of 5.1. So we're going to go ahead and dive into this, and I'll give you my thoughts. I've played a lot of Trickster. I've played against very good survivors, and I've played against pretty okay survivors, and I have, I think, a good understanding of where Trickster will generally fall. So excited to dive into this, but first we have to get through some of the preliminary killers, and that is going to be obviously Nurse and Spirit going to S+. Now, it's something we've talked about continuously time and time again. Nurse is the strongest killer in the game because she, at a high level, can just ignore everything. She doesn't have to worry about kicking or hitting gens. She can literally blink through pallets, through windows, through walls, and it's only a matter of time, right? Spirit, obviously being the sort of second strongest, the reason she's not stronger than Nurse in my eyes is because if played right, you can run a Spirit for a long time. If you just go through and drop every pallet or pre-drop every pallet, Spirit has to go through and crush those pallets generally. There's a lot more chance for her to get 50-50 mind gamed, whereas Nurse just blinks through, hit, don't even worry about it, right? So, you know, the biggest issue with Spirit, and that's why she's S+, is because she is completely invisible while moving at 170% or higher movement speeds. It gives survivors very little counterplay in what they can do besides pre-dropping pallets or getting lucky or sort of making some educated guesses. So we're putting Nurse and Spirit up there. In the S tier, we're going to put Hagatha Christie here. Hag, we love Hag. Hag is incredibly strong. We've seen Hag in tournaments time and time again, but Hag, even in solo queue play, has so many options. Now, a lot of you may have experience with Hag, and Hag may be sort of that basement camper, that hook camper, right? When people first pick up Hag, that's generally how she's played. Hook somebody, camp the hook, right? It's kind of the low-brow strategy. It's easy to overcome. If Hag is over chasing somebody else, you just pop the trap, or you just crouch walk through it, unhook, crouch walk away. That stuff is super simple. What makes Hag so potent is being able to smack somebody, and then they run away, and then they pop another trap, and she smacks somebody else. If you have a Hag player who's just incredibly giga-brained and is planning for everything the way that, you know, they should be, most Hag players are just cracked. They're insane at a really high level, and it's hard without a flashlight and knowledge to know exactly how to overcome Hag in some scenarios. So Hag is a huge one, and she's one of the, you know, kind of better killers in the game. She doesn't get given enough credit, but she's definitely up there. And then after that, we have Blight. Blight is insanely strong, and I don't really know if I put Blight over Hag or Hag over Blight. Part of me wants to put Blight over Hag, but I think the skill ceiling for Blight is just a little bit higher. There's a lot of little finesse things you can do. Obviously, flicks on Blight are still sort of contentious with DPI settings and things of that nature, but being able to look down to shrink your hitbox so you can round a few corners, having to think 4 steps ahead, bounce, 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 and there's the survivor, and being able to predict that reliably, very difficult to do. And Blight's one of those killers I have so much fun with, but to hit that upper echelon of skill ceiling with Blight is just, it's a lot of work. But he's incredibly powerful, and that speed, the potency, getting the rush tokens back very quickly. He can do a lot against survivors. So you may not have seen it, but Blights are pretty cracked as well. S tier is kind of the easy choice there, I think, for Blight. Now, as we go into the A tier, pretty simple solutions here. I think Oni is obviously the best choice here. Oni is an insta-down killer. The only thing that limits Oni is his ability to get first hit, right? First or second hit, right? Get the blood flowing, get the 40% on the first hit, get a second hit, get another 40% charge. You know, the big thing about Oni is it's once he gets that ability and pops it, and he's in pure demon fury, words, it's really hard to counteract him. You have to pick your specific loops, and loops like Shack and loops like Jungle Gyms and things like that are actually not great against Oni. He kind of does this thing because he can sort of strafe and curve his turns and get a flick at the end. Is like you can't just run a whole Shack wall and think that you're safe. You can't just run a long wall Jungle Gym and think that you're necessarily safe, on top of the fact that he can absolutely shred pallets, and the blood orbs give him a trail to follow if you're just skulking around and walking around. It also gives you a high priority to want to heal heal. And so that like kind of gives you a little bit of slowdown. It's just, he's got a lot in his kit. He's more Gigabrain than I think people give him credit for. He's incredibly strong. I almost want to put him in S, but unfortunately getting that first hit, he's just an M1 killer. And that's what keeps him from getting to that blight, that hag status. Is if really good survivors can keep him from that first hit, it's a tough game. It takes him a little bit to get started. So we're going to go ahead and move forward here, and we're going to pick up, I think, I want to pick up Pyramid Head and put him up here in A. The reason I want to put Pyramid Head up here is because of his kit. His ability to completely undo Will Make It, We're Gonna Live Forever. He can undo D-Strike, right? Because we're going to live forever, go pick up the slug, right? With Pyramid Head, you're probably not slugging too often if you can effectively apply the Torment status effect. If they're tormented, you just send them away, move on, right? Infectious Fright is so strong on him because with a lot of killers, Infectious Fright, you down somebody and you're like, oh, let me slug, generate pressure. But you don't necessarily need to do that with Pyramid Head. Now, there are cases where you would want to slug, but in a lot of cases with Infectious Fright, you just go bye and you keep your chase going, and somebody now has to run all the way across the map to get the uncage. You're chasing somebody else. It's keeping people spread out. On top of the fact that he can hit literally through walls, right? And you know, pallets and windows, right? Obviously, the lowbrow way to use Pyramid Head is pallets and windows, and that's it. But a smart survivor will run through the pallet and then double back for the stun, or will fake the window. And so it's on the Pyramid Head to understand his ability is very slow. It is not a Huntress hatchet by any means, and so it's very up to the Pyramid Head to shoot through the walls, right? Get those blind shots and really just apply pressure, keep people sweating. And if you can do that, and if you can keep people in cages and keep them spread out, I almost want to put Pyramid Head above Oni because of his immediate ability to, at the beginning of the game, just put pressure on, right? Oni has to be an M1 killer for a while. Pyramid Head, he's got your number immediately. So it's a tough thing there. You know, Oni's ability to one-shot down definitely changes things. So as we kind of move forward here, I'm going to put Plague, and this is always a tough one. I'm going to put Plague up here in A. Plague, I think, is one of the most mechanically difficult killers to understand, and in terms of decision-making, also very difficult, right? There are several different ways for survivors to counter. They can never cleanse, or they can all cleanse as fast as possible just to drain all your pools out, right? On top of that, just by virtue of being Plague, everybody gets an immediate 8-second heal no matter what. They don't need med kits because they get the fastest heal available to them, 8 seconds. So maybe not the fastest, but solo, that's the fastest heal. Just go drink, healed, you know. So by being Plague, they already have such powerful and meaningful counterplay. But as Plague, you also get the complete option just to drink from that pool and immediately go over and just hit 2 or 3 people, just boom, 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 and then follow up from a distance. She's insanely powerful if you can get the snowball going downhill, and that's on the player to be able to do, but at a high enough level, you can do it, and you should be doing it. And she's incredibly potent, very powerful. She puts survivors in a lot of scenarios, and it's on you to figure out how to counteract those scenarios. Vomiting on gens just to have information on, if I puke on these 2 gens in my 3 gen, if somebody comes by, I know they're on one of these 2 gens if they're sick, right? And people infecting other people. There's so many gigabrain things you can do with Plague. I think she's just very potent. She's underrated, underplayed, and underappreciated. She's awesome. And I think A is probably where she belongs. Maybe a low A, but I think A is pretty much where she needs to be for the most part. So next up we have Twins. I think I'm going to put the Twins up here. Twins are another one that I think survivors don't quite understand how to counterplay against right now, right? Like the genuine thing against almost every killer is just split up. Just everybody go your separate corners, your separate directions, and don't worry about it. You know, the killer can only chase one of us at a time. But the thing about Twins is if you do that and you choose not to heal and things like that, you leave yourself very susceptible to Victor slugging. And, you know, Victor runs up, he slugs you, he goes for somebody else, he slugs them. Suddenly you have a 3-man slug and you're like, what happened? Twins are toxic. I think people don't really realize that with Twins, you have to adjust your style, right? A little bit, right? You either have to be a god tier runner or you need to run 2 and 2 so that if one person gets slugged by Victor, the second person can kick Victor and get the first person back up. But inherently by doing that, you're not splitting up on as many gens. And I think that gives Twins a lot of power. On top of that, I mean, you have Victor able to like down somebody, hop on somebody else, and then Charlotte can hit somebody else or go for the pickup. This ability to bounce back and forth is insanely powerful. Now, the hook camping thing that Victor can do sucks. I hope it gets patched out. There's a few ideas we all have. Lynxy has some of those She is a Twins main, and I think hook camping is the biggest issue with Twins, but I think the ability to split pressure, to hit over pallets and picnic tables and things like that in certain scenarios just makes Victor very strong. And then just splitting that pressure, I think we always want killers that can split more pressure, 1v4, and I think Victor and Charlotte can do that if you're really paying attention to making the right choices and not overslugging, overusing, missing your shots. I think Twins definitely belong up there in the A, but again, maybe a little bit lower A. We'll kind of see. I'm actually not the expert on Twins, so all right. So up next in A tier, and I kind of hesitate to put this A tier, but I think it's low A. We're going to do Huntress. There's a few reasons for that. Huntress' ability to split pressure, again, very strong, way stronger than Trickster's, right? Is ability to hit one person, hit another person, commit to your second target without having to like chase them down with knives, you know? So Huntress, incredibly powerful, but again, just one of those abilities that if you don't have a great handle on, things can kind of fall apart fast. But you catch people unhooking, you catch people greeting out gens, you can really make Huntress work for you. And I think that I don't know that she's underrated. I think people just love Huntress from design to gameplay style. I think people love Huntress, and there's no better feeling than hitting a Huntress hatchet, but she is a lower A. I would say almost B, but she just has so much more than most B tier killers, and she's insane. So if you play her right, play that split pressure right, she's just nuts. So as we move into B tier, we're going to put Slinger. I think I'm going to put Slinger as B tier. There's a lot of things that Huntress does just far better than Slinger. There's a few things Slinger does a little bit better than Huntress, but you know, he's limited in his range. Obviously, he doesn't have a lullaby, which does give him the ability to like sneak up on people, get very, very close and shoot them. But he's very much like he shoots somebody and he has to reel them in. Everybody else is like scattering and making distance, right? With Huntress, it's just bah. You know, she just gets those multiple hits. Slinger is still locked into a 1v1 engagement, and he's very much like Trickster in the sense that his 1v1 is pretty oppressive, right, at windows. He can shoot somebody at a pallet and reel them around the other side and hit them. There's all kinds of like kind of goofy things you can do with Slinger, and there's great Slinger players out there. And this is not to say anything against like his effectiveness, but he does not split pressure particularly well, right? Perks like Save the Best for Last would allow you to get a hit and then get a shot really, really quickly and things like that. But at a base level, he does lack a little of the 4v1 potential and the immediate down sort of potential. And he doesn't have anything else in his kit. Like Oni has, the insta down, the speed, the turning. Plague has a lot. Pyramid Head has the cages that can nullify abilities. He can shoot through walls. Slinger just shoots, right? And so it's just a sort of one-off sort of thing. How you shoot and the way you use it's great, but his kit is pretty small. So I think Slinger's going to be B. I think he is kind of high B up there, obviously. Now transitioning over, we are going to move into Demogorgon. Demogorgon is solid B. I would say if there's a middle B tier killer, it's Demogorgon, right? Demogorgon has the ability to fake the shred so that people don't run straight lines at a window. He has the ability to hit people that do commit to the window, right? The ability to shred a pallet. On top of, I think the most underrated thing is his portals, right? Being able to move pretty smart and decently across the map and be undetectable for a short period of time when he does so. Obviously, there's a big yelling that Demogorgon does when he teleports and things like that, but he has movement. It is locked a little bit, and he has the ability, like I said, to shred, hit long range and things like that. Actually, between Demogorgon and Nemesis, there's very few differences. Demogorgon just has that speed, that ability to get around really, really quickly. With the portals, the counterplay obviously is the portals can be taken down, but if the portals are taken down, survivors weren't on gens, they were on the portals. So it's kind of this counterplay cake, I guess, if you will. And I think Demogorgon's just very solid B. He's super strong, he's super fun. You can make a lot of arguments for him being almost A. I don't think he quite reaches that yet, because again, he still does have to just break pallets or vault windows, but super fun, great killer. I love Demo, so moving forward, I think we are going to move into some interesting territory with my opinions here. I think we're going to put Nemesis under Demogorgon. Nemesis has a weirdness about him right now, and I think that he's stronger than people give him credit for. Yes, in a lot of cases, the tentacle has to infect somebody, which means that if you're going for tentacle hits and you're trying to infect, you have to hit a survivor 3 times to down them. In a lot of cases, I think I play him a lot like Plague, where I'll hit one person and then I hit them with the tentacle again. I'm tier 2, and then I M1, and I don't really worry about tiering up outside of that, right? So just 2 tentacle hits at the beginning, front load your chase, and then you're good for a little bit the rest of the match. Now, if somebody is going to vault a window and I can't get the M1 anyway, or they're already at a pallet that I can't quite get the M1, then you go for the tentacle hit. And most of the time, like in a vacuum, yes, if you tentacle hit, people are just going to go straight line. They're going to hold W. They're going to get some distance. But if somebody's about to throw a pallet and you hit them with the tentacle, they're about to vault a window, they're probably going to stay around their loop mostly. And so you do want to infect people to add the pressure of the tentacle. I think the interesting thing about Nemesis is survivor counterplay was very much thought about, because it's like, if you're not infected, then there's no pressure from the tentacle. It has to infect you first, right? And so I feel like survivor counterplay was thought about a little bit. Unfortunately, if you are infected, you still do get hit at pallets and windows, and I think that's why he goes into that B tier section, right? If people do have to vaccinate, then they have to go find vaccines. They're not on gens, right? On top of the fact that zombies just give you free information as you sort of walk around and as they track people. They're not highly accurate, and sometimes you'll see the occasional zombie down, but I think Nemesis has a lot in his toolbox to give you info, to slow people down just enough, and, you know, again, pallet breaking with a tentacle while you're able to strafe one direction or another just sort of gives him a lot to work with. So I think he's a solid B. I actually might start trying a 4K streak with him soon too, and bouncing back and forth between him and Trickster. Not sure. We'll see. That being said, I think we're going to move to, I almost want to say, Wraith. This is a little controversial. This is since the Wraith buff. I think, and I'm a little skewed on this. I think Wraith is certainly just an M1 killer, but I think when he's cloaked with brutal strength or, you know, whatever, well, I guess if we're not talking perks, right? I think if he's cloaked, he can chew pallets, right? Because he is very fast, he can body block windows, body block pallets. Nobody can get there. He can uncloak. He gets the surprise attack on you, or you early throw a pallet right before he's uncloaked and he gets to crush it while he's cloaked and just immediately catch up. His hit and run play style is incredibly strong. If he has perks, that gets augmented further. I'm a little conflicted on putting him at a solid B, but I feel like since his speed buff, he's just everywhere. He's kind of not oppressive, but he's hard to play against. And I think the big thing about Wraith is, you know, with the surprise attack and things like that, he just runs up on you so fast, even if you're running like a decent loop. The only thing that is difficult for him in some cases is things like Shack and Jungle Gym, but he has 115% movement speed. So there's a lot of things he can kind of do there. And if he could just force the pallet and the pallets are gone, I think Wraith has a lot going for him. Certainly more than I think like Ghostface and Myers and Pig do, because they are not fast, and stealth is not as beneficial as speed in DBD, I think. So I don't know. I'm a little conflicted on putting Wraith where he is, but I just feel like since that buff, that speed has really put him up there, and people are having a hard time going against him, I think, more so than ever. So yeah, little weirdness there. So now what I will say is I'm going to put Bubba above Wraith. I think I want to put maybe Bubba above Nemesis. The problem is Nemesis hits over pallets and through windows, and I think that's what Demo does. Demo doesn't hit over pallets, I guess. So Bubba, maybe Demo goes above or below Bubba. But Bubba's just incredibly powerful, right? He has a chainsaw. That chainsaw makes him move just as fast, if not slightly faster than a sprint burst. And if you use those tokens correctly, you can really make a lot of stuff happen, especially if you, don't bump, if you hug things tightly, you know, and he can chew through pallets like it's nobody's business. So if you're a smart Bubba and you're just paying attention, I feel like for the most part, the insta-down capability combined with the speed and maneuverability just gets you very fast, very far. And eventually people are going to run out of pallets and you're just going to, you know, be chainsawing the shit out of everybody. Now, there are cases where you're going to have to M1 people. Things like LT walls and things like that are a little trickier. Long wall jungle gyms are a little trickier. You do have to M1 sometimes, and that is sort of the slowdown required of Bubba. But I think that insta-down and that control gives him a lot of capability. The problem is he doesn't have insane speed like what Oni would have or Blight would have. So it doesn't really put him up there. Again, the ability to get from point A to point B is what would make most killers very strong. And Bubba has a lot of capability, but he's not inherently super, super fast. So kind of conflicted on where exactly in the B tier Bubba goes. Maybe he goes a little higher. Maybe he goes a little higher than Nemesis. Hard to say. Again, still conflicted on Wraith even being there. And We're going to move on to, I think we're going to put the Trickster here. All right. Lower B. You may ask why. I think that Trickster in a lot of scenarios can absolutely just shred the hell out of people, right? And there are a lot of scenarios where he absolutely cannot. If you're at a jungle gym that I can see you over, if you're at the, if you're just out in the open and there's no pallets, right? It's a fast down. It's very quick, right? It's not going to last long, right? There are scenarios like something like the shack, which is painful, right? Unlike Huntress, who just has to barely make it around the shack corner and get that hatchet, Trickster can go bink, bink, and then they're gone. They're around the corner, And so there are moments that are absolute pain with Trickster that puts him fairly low. And a lot of playing Trickster is knowing to not get in those scenarios or knowing your mind games so well that those scenarios aren't quite as bad. But against really smart survivors, you have to be able to control gens in areas that are advantageous to you. I almost want to put him in the C category still. His 1v1 is incredibly strong in certain scenarios, but it's not most scenarios. And that's kind of an issue that I have. So I think low B, maybe the lowest B, is kind of where he resides, if you will. So we're going to put Freddy up here. I think Freddy goes definitely, actually, I would dare to say Freddy goes above Wraith and that's a tough one. Yeah, I put Freddy where Freddy goes here in the B tier scale, because the thing with Freddy is we're going to talk about the snares. The pallets I don't think are very strong, to be honest with you. I think they can be, but I think you have to wait for pallets to get busted before they become like hyper effective, wait for somebody to break shack pallet, then drop a new shack pallet, right? And freak people out that way. Stuff like that. Snares can be incredibly powerful. You have to know when to use snares, right? Not using snares right in front of pallets or windows, but using them on the long side so that people step through them before they get to pallets, things like that. And the ability for Freddy to teleport and warp, and the lack of a terror radius does make it a little inspecific on where he is. The passive phasing makes it a little tougher where he is. I don't think that Freddy is like God tier or anything like that, because I don't think the snares are that big a deal. Ultimately, if you end up early dropping a ton of pallets, he does lack a little something. His teleport does have a long enough cooldown, and unlike Wraith and other killers who are very fast, he still has to, like, if you pre-dropped every pallet, he has to kick it and then just walk and then kick it. And so if you choose not to loop, Freddy loses a lot of his potency. Or if you just don't agree to loop and you make one rotation through the pallet, he does lose a lot. So the teleport is good, but he doesn't have anything that really pressures at a distance like what Demogorgon, Nemesis, Slinger has. He doesn't have an insta-down like Bubba. So I think I feel confident putting him in B tier. For some reason, survivors lose their minds when they play against Freddy, and they're just not very aware. And it can feel like Freddy is everywhere or very oppressive when you're a survivor who doesn't quite have the knowledge. I just think that actually at a high level, Freddy is really not that strong. Not as strong as other killers. I think Demogorgon does a lot more effectively than Freddy does, right? So, and then lastly, I think we're going to put Doc up here. I think I want to put Doc under... I almost want to put Doc under Trickster. And I'm sure there's a Doc main that's going to just like slander me in the comment section, but the problem with Doc is, like, at a really high level, survivors just don't greed pallets, right? The shock is decent, and we're talking no add-ons, right? The shock is decent, and you get some free info off of that, but that info is not imposing. So you can see where people are, but unlike the zombies from Nemesis, that info is just info. That's all it is. Ultimately, unlike Trickster at low loops and things like that can absolutely just fire off quite a few shots at low loops and just demolish somebody, whereas Doc is trying to get that perfect timing, and if they don't throw it, or if he's timing it just slightly off, they throw the pallet, he has to crush the pallet, keep moving, Now, there are some Doc techs where somebody throws the pallet as you shock them, and then they can't vault back over, so you can hit them and things like that. And that's what makes it shaky for me with him compared to Trickster. Now, at things like Shack and things like Jungle Gyms, 2.5 seconds is tough with Doc to get, and I think he's stronger at those tiles than Trickster, but I think he's weaker than Trickster at low loops, out in the open loops. Ultimately he still has to M1 and then M1 again, and that's 3 seconds of cooldown per M1, whereas Trickster can just keep hurtling knives at people, and so I just think that Trickster has a little bit more in that way, but I think against Doc people may be less versed, or it seems less obvious, because it's Trickster, it's just break line of sight. With Doc, it's maybe a little more cerebral. I don't know. It's interesting. What do you guys think? I think the next ones are going to be pretty self-explanatory. We are going to end up putting Billy down here in the C tier. I love Billy to death, but I think what really killed Billy was not anything other than better killers coming out. I love Billy. I think Billy's fun, and I think people don't play against enough Billy, so they don't know really how to go against him. They don't know about curves and things like that. But here's the thing about Billy is like most survivors that are really high level just throw pallets at you. They'll rotate something once and then throw the pallet. They don't greed a lot of stuff, and if they do, they certainly go down. But at Shack and things like that, against a smart survivor, getting a curve at Shack is just, it's so difficult. It's so rare. Even amongst the best Billies, if they're playing against pretty decent survivors, a lot of it is M1 Billy, right? And, the stiffness of his ability, yes, he does have speed to get to locations, which almost makes me want to put him higher up there, but the usefulness of his ability to insta-down kind of fluctuates really heavily. And I could be completely wrong about this, so you guys let me know. I'm still learning Billy a lot, and I do like him, but I feel like most of the time his ability in practice isn't necessarily what gives him a lot. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now we're going to go ahead and put these three down here. We're going to go Ghostface, Myers, Pig. Their 1v1 potential is generally awful. Ghostface can sneak up on people. They can all sneak up on people, right? Ghostface can get a grab. Myers could get a grab. But in a general scenario where people know where you're coming from, you get exposed, or you're tier 2 Myers or something like that, it's loop, you loop the jungle gym, drop the pallet. Loop the Shack, drop the pallet. They're super limited in their ability to just overcome those loops, unless they're using perks to help them with those loops. They're just M1 killers. It's really all that simple. Even with the Pig RNG traps, the RNG doesn't always work in her favor. And oftentimes with Pig, it's like, yeah, I trap somebody, they get it off first try. Sick. You know what I mean? So not my favorite. I love Pig to death. I think she's great. The Pig dash has too much of a charge wind up. If a survivor just leaves a loop when she Pig dashes, then she just can't reach them. Her 1v1 is just not as good as I wish it was, honestly. I think we're going to go with Legion next. I actually think Legion has a little bit more potential than the stealth killers. And this isn't that Legion's dog shit. I think all of this in a vacuum is just really small differences. Here's the thing about Legion, right? If people throw pallets when Legion is about to Feral Frenzy, then they're wasting a lot of their pallets. And you see that a lot, where they think they can stun a Legion out of Feral Frenzy, but he steps back, vaults it, hits him, Legion gets information, who's in my terror radius. Legion also forces people to mend over and over. Now, I think mending as a killer power is not a great ability. I think just slowing down to do this for the sake of doing it is super not engaging. I don't like playing against Legion. But if every survivor splits up, that Feral Frenzy doesn't matter, right? If you Feral Frenzy hit somebody and survivors just aren't in your terror radius, then you have a 4-second cooldown on top of the survivor. You Feral Frenzy, they run away, 4-second cooldown, or you run back up on them, then you cancel, then you have another 4-second cooldown, then you have to M1 them, and they're looping around. It's just, at a high level, Legion just crumbles. Now, in solo queues, I'm sure Legion does fantastically, because people just don't know really how to handle it. They're healing too much, things like that. But at a really high level, I just think Legion kind of deflates a little bit. Next, we're going to have Clown at the bottom here. The problem with Clown is Clown did get a buff. He did get these speed bottles. The problem with the speed bottles is they do affect survivors, and that means that you have to be extra giga brain when you use them, and there is nothing wrong with that. But, the reload is a lot better and things like that. But it doesn't really do a lot for him. There's a lot of loops where Clown still just has to run the circle, break the pallet, right? Unless survivors get greedy. If survivors play it safe, and again, at a high level, a lot of survivors are going to play it safe, it just doesn't do much for you. The speed is great, but you have to slow them and speed you up. And at that point, then somebody vaults a pallet or vaults a window, and you're still stuck on the other side of it. You still have to kick every pallet or vault the windows, or again, any M1 killer that just has to run the loop and then M1, they just automatically kind of sink a little bit lower than other people, right? Freddy is the exception and Wraith is the exception because of their teleportation, their speed, or their other sort of items in their kit, but they're very thin, That's why Doc almost is in my mind, almost C tier. And then we have Trapper. The problem with Trapper is people can just disarm his traps. He takes so much time in the early game to set up, and then if somebody comes behind, it just goes snap, snap, snap. all the time he invested is now wasted. You know, it's unlike Hag, who can, you know, somebody pops the trap, she's like, boom, what's up? You know, like Trapper's chasing somebody, they hear their trap go and they go, oh, my trap popped. They're not over there. They're not doing anything. There's no punishment for popping the trap, right? With Hag, you always have to wonder, can she teleport over here? Is she going to hit me, right? But with Trapper, there's no penalty for snapping the traps on top of the intense amount of time that it takes him just to set them back up, right? You have to be super time efficient to be able to play Trapper well. And if survivors are smart, I mean, I remember I've played Blood Lodge so many times with Trapper and I just never got a trap on people. Now, it doesn't mean I still didn't like 1K or 2K because they got sloppy or in some cases, I've even 4K'd those kinds of matches. But any killer who has an ability that can completely be nullified, like Plagues isn't nullified, right? There's a trade. They cleanse? Well, then you get something. With Trapper, they just pop it and walk away. They don't take damage. They don't have to mend. They don't go down a health state. They don't need an item to snap the traps. On top of, again, when he spawns in, he either has add-ons for multiple traps or he has to go get the traps. He has to waste more time using his ability than anyone in the game. And at a really high level, people just shit on Trapper. And I would love to see a buff that puts Trapper in B or A tier, right? Or he, I don't know, reloads at lockers, which I think would be weird, or he just starts with all his traps like Hag. But I would love to take it a step further and make it so that if somebody disarms a trap, they take damage for it, right? That it doesn't down them, but you know, I would love to see if you're in the healthy state and you snap a trap, it puts you in the wounded state, right? I would just love to see that. I know that is an add-on he already has, but the problem is people get to snap his traps again with no, like, throw caution to the wind, right? I think a cool exception would be make it so toolboxes could pop the traps, not break them permanently, but just pop the traps without injuring somebody, right? So that if you brought a toolbox and it is a trapper, haha, it's like flashlights and Hag. But if you didn't, then one person has to be wounded and go through snapping all the traps. But if they're wounded, then, you know, the chases could be easier for Trapper. And I just think that would be a lot more fun. And maybe it's too far one direction, but I just think like there's no counterplay. Like if they snap your trap, they snap your trap. That's it. You have to bring an add-on that resets it automatically every 30 seconds. And that's maybe that should be base kit. They just reset, which I think that's too strong, but I don't know. Anyway, that's the tier list. That was, 30 minutes of a tier list? What do you guys think of where everybody falls right now? I feel pretty comfortable in this. I think there are small adjustments, but I don't think I'm too off about too much. What do you guys think, though? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll be praying to the entity that I'll see you either on Twitch, twitch.tv/DyllonKG, or in the next videos.